Hi, everyone. My name is Kelvin Coleman. I'm the Executive Director of the National Cybersecurity Alliance, and I can't thank you enough for joining us here today to learn a little bit more about ransomware, prevention, response, and recovery. And I tell you what, we have two great panelists with us today. I'm going to introduce them in a minute, but I'm going to give you a little bit more information about this webinar, co-hosted by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, as well as the National Cybersecurity Alliance. You will get more information about both CISA and the National Cybersecurity Alliance in terms of how to get in touch with us at the end of this webinar. We got a nice big slide for you with all the information on how to contact us. More about the National Cybersecurity Alliance, though, it says it right there. We convene, we educate, we amplify. Those things are right in our sweet spot, and we absolutely love doing it, and we're great at it. Partnering with the private sector, certainly, who's represented by Ryan here today, partnering with the public sector and our friends at CISA. Bridgette, just a really, really great opportunity for us to do what we do best: convene, educate, amplify. Cybersecurity My Business, Cybersecurity Awareness Month, Data Privacy Day are some of our programs. And coming to you in April, stay tuned, is Identity Management Day. More about that later on. CISA. Just a little bit of information about the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, the nation's risk advisor. That is such a great way to put it. And again, at the end of this slide, you will get more information on how to get in touch with CISA, because they are all over the country, all 50 states, representing 365 people in the 50 states and 6 territories, and helping America to defend against today's threats. And certainly tomorrow's as well. And so, I may get in trouble with Bridgette and Lena for saying, please contact them. They want to hear from you. They want to work with you. They have tools and resources and support that can help you through these challenges as it relates to ransomware. A little bit about me, just very quickly. Again, Executive Director, absolute, love my job, love working with these great folks. And I'm always asked that background. That is the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. My daughter took that with her iPhone. So there you go. Moving on to Bridgette. I've known Bridgette for many years now. We've not only colleagues, but friends for a long time. Bridgette is perhaps one of the most smartest. That's not grammatically correct. One of the smartest. Maybe she is the most smartest. I don't know. One of the smartest, just really sharp, well connected, and knows how to bring the pieces together. So Bridgette, thank you so very much for being here with us today.
It's my honor.
And certainly Ryan, Ryan's on our board of directors at the National Cybersecurity Alliance. So in effect, he's kind of my boss. So I hope we have a really good showing here today. But Executive Vice President at Proofpoint leads a global team of security experts. If you really want to understand cyber sort of from a historical perspective, threats, things of that nature, you got to see Ryan's presentation, and you're going to get to experience some of it today. But Ryan, thank you so very much for being with us today.
It's a pleasure.
We're going to jump right into it, because I know, folks on the call, they have busy lives and things they want to get to. And we only have an hour with the two of you, which is probably a bit short, knowing everything that you know. So let's jump right into it. And by the way, for the audience, we're very dynamic. And so if you have questions throughout, please send them to us. We will answer throughout instead of waiting at the end. And we will have time for questions at the end. But we want it to be very dynamic, and so if you have questions or comments, send them to us, and we will implement them into our presentation. Let's jump right into it. Bridgette, let me start with you, and Ryan, the same question is going to come to you. Let's just talk about it. Why is the education space such a rich target for cyber criminals? Bridgette, let's start with you.
Thank you, Kelvin, and thank you everybody who is tuning in and who will be tuning in at a different time at your leisure whenever you're watching this later in the schedule. But the real crux we've really seen, and I know that Ryan will touch on this as well, is that CISA has really seen a marked increase in ransomware attacks on vulnerable systems, and school systems are no exception to that. State and local systems are no exception to that. Small, medium businesses are no exception to that. In a joint security alert that CISA published on December 10th with the FBI and the Multi-State Information Sharing Analysis Center, MSISAC, who we work very, very closely together, in addition to working with great folks like Kelvin at the NCSA. But we detailed an increasing amount of cyber attacks targeting K through 12 schools specifically. And these attacks have led to ransomware infections, data theft, and disruption of, sadly, remote learning services that so many of us, myself included as a parent of 3 young children, rely on so dedicatedly throughout this pandemic. So I think that one of the things that the alert pointed out between us and FBI and MSISAC is that the adversaries of all levels, shapes, and form they're always watching what is happening in the world, and they are never too slow to take advantage of an opportunity when perhaps our focus is on other things. And in the K through 12 arena, there was a lot that was focused on getting kids safely, either in school or hybrid, or dealing with the pandemic at large, remote learning, safety concerns, all of that was going on, as well as, of course, the hundreds and thousands of other logistics that K through 12 school systems were dealing with. And that's a perfect opportunity, a perfect recipe for adversaries and just folks who are up to no good to look around and be like, great, while they're looking this way, why don't we go around the back and see what we can do? And so again, with our alert and our K through 12 guidance I have here that is on our website as well, we're really trying to push the message of keeping your eye on the ball, that while it's of all the things that you're dealing with at one time, with school safety on the physical side, of course, the pandemic response, but cybersecurity has to be one of those top things that your school systems need to pay attention to, and of course, secure your data, your student and employee data, and other critical information sets that you hold within your school systems and other government services.
Wow, that's a lot, Bridgette, and certainly very robust in terms of the information you shared, as well as the handout. And I will just remind people, you can go to CISA's website to get that document that Bridgette was talking about. Ryan, I'm going to come to you because I imagine you have a few other things to add to that. Like, why is it such a rich environment for these cyber criminals?
That's a really good question that I think actually could benefit from just demystifying ransomware. Ransomware doesn't really work in too many ways, and it's really only a development that's basically had 2 phases. If you go back to the origins of ransomware, in theory, you can actually go back to the 1980s when ransomware was actually spread via a floppy disk. That is a thing that actually happened. We don't have time for that whole story today, but modern ransomware really basically starts in 2015, 2016. Once attackers realize that they can use basically self-encrypting programs to go after victims and then basically extort them for money. The first phase of ransomware, though, was spray and pray. We would see hundreds of millions of malicious emails. We would see hundreds of millions of potential RDP connections. That's remote desktop protocol, basically a way to manage a computer endpoint from somewhere far away. Unfortunately, that is very much relied upon by organizations like K through 12 school districts, frankly, far too often. But that spray and pray world would lead to a couple of machines being compromised. It wouldn't lead to the entire set of computers that an organization like a school district relied on to actually provision something as important as remote learning. That all didn't go down together. So that spray and pray was really, frankly, enabled by Bitcoin. I have to point out the obvious here. Financial crime is hard. And actually stealing money, you can't like Venmo or PayPal or ransom. That would get tracked down, and everybody's friends at the FBI would be knocking on doors very quickly. But cryptocurrency is fundamentally different. And honestly, that's what enables this whole first wave. The second wave, though, starts a couple of years later, once ransomware actors realize that if I take the whole thing down, I have much more leverage in an extortion scenario. Because again, extortion is not new at all. This part of how extortion plays out does feel a bit novel. So that phase really starts in 2018 and it gets refined over time. But to answer the specific question, why it's K through 12 sort of disproportionately, just to put it in perspective, the public sector accounts for about 10 to 11% of total ransomware victims, at least according to our data. CISA probably has better data. But overall, that's not federal government, because the federal government's not going to pay. So there's no point in actually trying to extort the federal government. State, local, K through 12, there's a chance to get paid out. Either the insurer covers that, or there's some payment at the end of that. And so ultimately, the fact that there is monetization here, again, via cryptocurrencies, is why K through 12 is sort of the disproportionate target. There is the time pressure, there's the urgency, very, very similar to healthcare in that regard. And now that we're in this phase of ransomware where the entire organization's ability to do its mission can be imperiled by this, they just have so much leverage that the model, unfortunately, is working.
If we stopped right now, I think our attendees would be like, wow, that, such great information already off the bat. Because Bridgette, what I hear you talking about accessibility was that was the call when COVID when COVID came upon us, not necessarily security. And I told the audience you'd get a sort of historical perspective from Ryan. So I really appreciate that. Ryan, let me come back to you though. A question I get a lot: who at a school should be educated on cybersecurity?
The answer is everybody, because frankly, just look at the anatomy of a ransomware attack. There's basically 3 total ways that ransomware can enter an organization. So when you think about kind of decomposing that into something that could turn into an action plan that a K through 12 school district could actually execute, you separate 2 of those techniques that are mostly down to IT and IT configuration. That is software vulnerabilities facing the internet, and again, that remote desktop protocol thing that I mentioned before. IT can probably do a good job on those 2 elements. On the other hand, if you look at the vast majority of K through 12 victims, the first step in that ransomware infection was a phishing email. And those phishing emails are why we have to educate everybody. They can hit anybody, and an attacker who has a foothold, no matter what that foothold looks like, connected via VPN back to the main K through 12 system, maybe there's Active Directory, maybe you're a Google Workspace environment, that's what they're after. So that initial point of presence, which is largely happening via malware, and that malware, and this is I think an important point, that malware always requires human interaction. We don't see that the malware has some magic set of vulnerabilities, even if you are, on a cable modem that hasn't been patched in 5 years, and you haven't updated your Windows box or your Mac device in a while. That's not how they're getting in. They're sending you a spreadsheet or Word document, and it's got macros in it, and you have this little yellow bar at the top that says enable content. If every single person in every K through 12 school district knew, you really, really better be sure before you click that button, we would be in a much, much, much better place. And that ultimately, though, means that we have to basically educate a huge proportion of people, because those phishing emails are basically about 90% of the initial access vector for ransomware actors.
Well, by the way, with the full support of Ryan and Proofpoint, the National Cybersecurity Alliance does want you to update your system, though. Very important to do that. But Ryan, great point, though, because I often give interviews to media who said, how they're attacking. And I say, well, phishing. And say, no. What's the new exotic, exciting way that they're doing it? Yeah. Phishing. And so they always want this other answer when you just point out up to 80%, I think you said, is coming through phishing.
I want to actually add one hilarious element to that briefly.
Please.
The #1 malicious technique now that we see by volume targeting K through 12 organizations is Excel for macros. And so Microsoft Excel has a long history as a computer software program. Microsoft Excel version 4 came out in 1992 and was obsolete by 1994. However, if you created a spreadsheet in Microsoft Excel back in 1993, it'll still open in Microsoft Excel that you have now. And of course, back in 1992, no one knew what a malicious macro was yet. So there's all kinds of things built into it that threat actors can abuse. So not only is there not anything new, when you do find something new, it's actually super old.
Yeah. See, educators, I told you, you're going to get an education here today. Bridgette, it's sort of the same question, which I imagine you're going to have a similar answer, but who should be educated? And I'm going to follow up with you, Bridgette, about the current state of cybersecurity education for K through 12 education leaders. Is there improvement there? So, two-part question for you, Bridgette. Who should be educated? And where are we in terms of those folks being educated on cybersecurity?
Yeah, thank you, Kelvin. I think that's a great question. And again, to my colleague, Ryan, great explanation, because it is everybody. And I often say when I talk to groups and stakeholders that it's often a game of whack-a-mole in terms of cybersecurity protection within an organization, because you truly are only as secure as every user in your organization or who connects with you. And so that's why things like Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which we partner with, of course, the National Cybersecurity Alliance in October. If you didn't know that, October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Stay tuned to how you can help utilize that opportunity to educate and promote good cybersecurity practices in October, and then hopefully carry them throughout the year. Don't just do cybersecurity in October, you have to do it all year long. But as Ryan said, it's everybody from top down. It is everybody from the superintendent all the way, honestly, to your students in schools who are using, and now everybody is now because of COVID, everybody is on laptops. I have kindergartner twins, girls who just started kindergarten in a pandemic virtually, and who had never used a laptop in their life. Used an iPad a couple times, but never a laptop. And they are now pros. And I would honestly say, I think they can do more things than I can on their laptop. They're changing configurations and changing pictures in the background and doing all kinds of things that it did not take them long to figure out how to do that kind of stuff. And I truly believe that we all as a society need to do a better job. This goes to your second part of that question, Kelvin. We need to do a better job of instilling good cybersecurity practices all the way down from the second we give students and our own personal children devices. And it goes from the whole gamut of what we're trying to protect. We're trying to protect our students and our children from cyberbullying, from nefarious, cyber safety tips of, strange people texting them or, messaging them, etc. All the way to if you get an email randomly from a Nigerian prince, he doesn't want to give you money. Like this is, and again, goes back to Ryan's point. If they didn't get results, they would stop sending all of these emails, but it still works. And this is like been a ploy, the Nigerian prince and the IRS is, contacting you to give you a refund. The IRS never gives you a refund. Let's be honest, that's not how it works. But it's all of those kinds of things that are lumped in terms of cybersecurity that I think we need to start educating at the youngest age possible, those good cybersecurity practices. And again, all the way up through our organization. And what we're saying today, Ryan and I, this is the exact same thing that we say to Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, to our international colleagues and partners. We're all grappling with the same challenge, but it's the same message. We all have a responsibility as a user, whether we are in our home or whether we are in our business or whether we are a student or a colleague in the school system. And I can tell you that even in recent times, K through 12 has had some high profile victims when it comes to ransomware, where it has been publicized. Baltimore County is one. Sadly, my actual school system, Fairfax County, in Fairfax County, Virginia. It's the 10th largest county in the entire country when it comes to the school system, of 190,000 students that were all virtual, including their staff and teacher workforce. And they were hit with ransomware during the pandemic. And it's, you know, and again, it goes back to these folks who are just using any opportunity, any sign of weakness or distraction to be able to look around and see if they can get in, see if they can, like Ryan said, send an email, and it may not be like one email. It's, you throw the seeds out and you see who bites. And so it's really everyone's responsibility, and you don't want to be that headline, and you don't want to find yourself in the position where you're also then having to communicate with your community, not just of your, you know, your colleagues and your staff, but also student data and personal identifiable information, et cetera. You don't want to be in that spot where your information is locked up and being held, as Ryan said, literally for ransom. And I think the important thing to know too, and we'll talk a little more about this as well, that the things that you can do to help prevent things like ransomware affecting your school system are the same practices that we want to sit there and instill of, again, having good basic cyber hygiene for your information systems that help prevent all kinds of opportunities for bad guys, for bad things, et cetera, that could happen to your organization. So you protecting and being aware of what can actually help you prevent one thing actually can help prevent a lot of things at the same time, which is a good value for your investment.
Bridgette, you said something, all of that was incredible. And I want to pick up on something, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of attendees, good attendance today. You said, you know, the same advice that we're giving them today, the advice we give to Fortune 500s, Fortune 100s, we give to government leaders. I think that's so important for folks on this webinar to understand, right? That we are giving them the very best of what we know. And some of these things are low-hanging fruit things that you can do to help prevent, you know, becoming a victim. You know, throw you a curveball, both of you. It's the questions are coming in hot and fast. They really are. Question here, and Bridgette, I'm gonna start with you on this one. Since schools districts are usually underfunded, any suggestions or resources for convincing boards of education, superintendents, and the public on the need to increase funding to protect networks? And I give that to you, Bridgette, because I know this, you know, right in your swim lane.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think Ryan and Kelvin would agree. The three of us are not putting our heads in the sand thinking this is an easy snap of the fingers. And it's like, why are you not investing in this and putting your head in the game? Please don't take any of our comments and our commentary as not being realistic of the extreme challenges that school systems across the country, even mine, that is, again, the 10th largest school system in the country, is dealing with when it comes to constant budget cuts and other budget realities that you're all facing, especially going in and coming out of, knock on wood, coming out of a pandemic, literally a pandemic we have never had in 100 years situation, and the costs that are being bestowed on you, that you are all being asked to squeeze literally water out of rocks. We have total empathy. And I will tell you, this is not any different than the same conversations that we have with especially state and local agencies and government partners about how do we get funds to be able to do that. It's all tied with whether it's water systems and other, you know, municipality co-owned entities, school boards, and school systems, or local governments at large. How do we get funds to be able to do some of this and that trade-off? I think that there's a couple different answers, and none of them are easy and none of them are the magic bullet. But I think one of them is coordinating with agencies of your similar scope, so other school systems that are neighboring with you, to see about, can you all go in together on services, et cetera, and not necessarily paying for the same thing 5 different times in, let's say in my area, the Northern Virginia tip of the state of Virginia. We have several different counties. And it's one of the pieces of advice I've given to my school board and school counties as well, is that, you know, there is an advantage to going in together on things. And that's an opportunity. I would also recommend going and talking and making connections with your state, your county, first of all, CIO and CISO, those chief information officers and chief information security officers, and the connections that they have to the state equivalents, the state CIOs and state CISOs. They are also, I will tell you, I know that they are also fighting for funds as well, but I think that there is a opportunity for things like national or federal grant funding, which I can promise you we are advocating to anybody who will listen, that there needs to be more cyber dedicated funding for state and local entities, and that goes down to school systems as well. We cannot continue to try and, again, squeeze water out of rocks without helping you. And so we are working on that, I promise, on legislation and with our legislator partners on the Hill, as well as, of course, at the cabinet level. You have an advocate within CISA for that. But coming together with other entities within your state so that the state as a block can go after some of these grant funds that our partners at the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, that they administer on the Homeland Security Grant Program and other areas. And sometimes it's, again, it's more cost effective if you're saying that we need $1 million or something like that, let's say, and it could cover all of us by this service or this, you know, this offering, et cetera, that gets more weight behind that grant request within your own state when they're weighing the thousands of requests that all the different parts of the state are asking for, whether it's more fire trucks or more hazmat suits or more police forces, et cetera. It gives you some weight. And I think, I will also say, I think utilizing, sadly, things like my county, hopefully Fairfax County is not mad at me for saying their name, but like Baltimore and others, and you can Google, you know, school ransomware. And I think it's a matter of continuously putting pressure on your leadership and the school board and saying, we do not want to become another statistic. We need to invest in this. And it's this initial investment and continuing investment that will prevent us from having additional large expenses down the line. So.
Yeah. You know, Bridgette, as you talk, I couldn't help. Obviously, I hear the subject matter expert and you giving us really great information, but I also hear the parent, you know, someone who's in this fight and understands it. So really appreciate that. And this is a very active audience. Getting a lot of questions here. And Ryan, I think you have some slides actually for this next question that I'm about to tee up for you, because one of the questions is asking about most valuable data, and is it student data? What's the monetization of data? What's the value of a school needing to regain access to the system? So my question to you, Ryan, is that, you know, there's obviously been a huge increase in ransomware attacks. What has led to this increase? And just last month, Proofpoint, you know, you announced that ransomware demands have spiked by, and listen to this, 320%. Absolutely astonishing over the last year. Ryan, why has ransomware persisted, even when we know so much more about it and the coverage and things of that nature?
Simply because it works. Right? If it didn't work as a monetization strategy, they would not be doing it. And actually, this is what that data shows. The number one and number two threat types. Again, we kind of use some abstruse cybersecurity language here, but what used to be called a banking Trojan now has what is called downloader functionality. Sometimes we even just say it's not even stealing money from bank accounts anymore. It's a piece of malware that only exists to download other malware. Those are the downloaders you see in the data there. Those are the #1 and #2 threat types that we see in K through 12 organizations. Those are only interesting because they are the first step of a ransomware attack. Again, about 90% of the time. And the actors are really good at measuring what works. So they're going to keep doubling and tripling down on an effective technique when they find it. I thought Bridgette's guidance on how to ask for funding on this was absolutely brilliant, particularly the strategy of kind of coming together and being a bigger block. But the other thing I would really urge here is that you can be scrappy, you can be creative, even if you don't have a lot of those resources. Again, if you look at data like this, it can be a little daunting, but again, 90% of the problem is coming in through email. So if you can spin up an effort to educate your user population, from the superintendent down to the students, that will have an impact. And the question actually, I think, referred to something that is an interesting point that I feel fairly strongly about. Talked about, protecting our network. That is strictly true. And in cybersecurity, we often use fancy terms for ourselves like network defenders. Yeah. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a threat targeted at a person, and the person is the incursion vector. The person's vulnerability is what is actually being exploited here. And if we want to actually move to the next slide, I did want to actually show one more view on kind of how the actor groups are really kind of coalescing around the ransomware types. I'm not going to bore you with the decoder ring here, but every single one of these groups that starts with 5 is a ransomware actor. So the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm not even going to count. Targeting K through 12. It's actually a fairly similar story in higher education as well. That's their monetization technique. That is their playbook. And it is at the expense of basically any other type of thing that we would see in K through 12. We don't actually see the business email compromise actors and some of the other ones that do other types of cybercrime nearly as present because, again, one playbook and it works. Why would you do anything different? But actually, the last data point I think is the most interesting one. When you kind of think about how all of this segments out in terms of just the problem space. You do not need to buy a $100,000 firewall to keep yourself safe from ransomware. That will not actually work because, again, phishing attacks, somebody opens an attachment, runs a macro, they're on that endpoint, and then actually things get really hard. That's the stuff that the Fortune 500s also struggle with. I have an infected machine. I have basically an adversary inside my world who can then act basically as that user. That's really, really hard to identify. But even if you have to get scrappy, if you want to close down that initial vector, educate everybody on, tell them the Excel4 macro story. Tell them don't trust that Excel document. Please, please, please. Even if you don't know what a macro is, no student on earth should be playing around with Excel macros. Maybe there are accounting classes in high schools that actually use Excel macros. But apart from that incredibly rare little scenario, don't ever click on that. It's what we tell you every October. It's what certainly resonates as advice all year long. But ultimately, some of these solutions are simple and actually free. And it really isn't some magic cybersecurity technology that you have to buy that will solve this problem. If that were the case, this world would be radically different. As it happens, cybersecurity is a $100 billion industry that has not solved this problem. So in a lot of respects, we are not necessarily focused on the thing that would be the most impactful here, which at the end of the day, I think is the human element for about 90% of these threats. And then the other 10%, I actually think you can get scrappy on that front too. Crowdsource a penetration test. Go figure out some smart computer science student in high school who knows how to use a tool like Shodan. Figure out if you have a vulnerable Exchange server, as we've heard about in the news over the last couple of weeks. You can actually look at what the ransomware actors are looking at too. They're looking at you from the outside. Do you have remote desktop protocol open? Do you have a very obviously vulnerable system like the Exchange servers that we've heard so much about that are now actually unfortunately starting to be infected with ransomware? A high school student in a computer science class, Googling, using Twitter, and using YouTube can figure out how to tell you if you're exposed. None of that costs any money. And it is the sort of thing that does require a little bit of knowledge, but that knowledge is out there, and CISA is a phenomenal source of information about how to do that in practice.
I don't know if our audience really had in mind that they would not only get all this great information, but get great information that won't cost them a whole lot, right? You know, what we're talking about is some low-hanging fruit things. And for the audience, I will say, I'm not going to assume you understand all of our jargon, right? When Ryan talks about crowdsourcing, he's talking about the exact thing that Bridgette talked about earlier. Get together, right? You know, form a consortium, you know, that can go and have a bit more power in numbers there. Ryan, those you talked about the 5s. I counted at least 15. I think these are all individual attack. Like, can you say that one or talk about that one more time?
Sure. So we track at this point about 160 total threat actors, and some of them are the ones that you hear about in the news, the nation state APTs, as we tend to abbreviate them. That's Advanced Persistent Threat, which is an ancient Air Force term that we have repurposed in cybersecurity for reasons that no one really remembers. But either way, you know, the ransomware actors, all the 5 groups, insofar as we can track them and understand their infrastructure, they're largely operating out of Eastern Europe and the Russian Federation. We know that from basically the languages they speak and how they communicate in some of the forums, because they're running an economy too. There are different groups that serve different parts of their own pipeline. Not to dwell on that, that's a whole nother hour or possibly several hours of discussion there. The other groups though that are on this Threat Actor 800, we actually created in response to CISA. You know, there was a ransomware alert around healthcare that happened, I want to say that early October. Bridgette probably remembers better than I do.
Very good, Ryan. Very good. October, yes. Perfect timing for National Cybersecurity Awareness Month.
Exactly. So we actually peeled that specific threat actor off. They did mostly target healthcare, but they swept up some K-12 organizations in that targeting. Some of these other groups, the ones that start with 2 in this data set, those are the business email compromised ones. They're all over the world. As Bridgette mentioned, some of them are in West Africa, some of them are in East Asia, some of them are right here in the United States, but they're mostly interested in wire transfers. And we've certainly seen them be a huge thorn in the side of K-12. I have personally seen a multi-million-dollar loss on a new school campus. It was paid to the wrong bank account. Nobody noticed for several weeks, and unfortunately the money was not able to be clawed back. Those actors are certainly present. What we're not seeing here is a lot of nation state APTs. You wouldn't expect them to go after K-12 in general. We do see them in higher education much more frequently, but not really part of your threat model, as we, in our fancy cybersecurity language, put it, which is a good thing. You don't want them. That would be another giant headache that, again, when resources are constrained, you don't want to be up against.
By the way, I'm taking all my questions and I'm asking you just from the audience at this point. So, Bridgette, Ryan,
Yeah, these are not the questions that Kelvin talked to us about. So they are very good questions that the audience is coming up with. So keep them coming.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Exactly. I think that's more valuable, right? That we want to hear from them.
Absolutely.
And Bridgette, something for you here. This is a good one here. Is it illegal to pay ransomware? If schools stop paying, shouldn't that reduce ransomware demand? So 2-part question there. Is it illegal? And if you stop paying it, the federal government doesn't pay it, you know, wouldn't that reduce?
So I'm not a lawyer. So I want to put that out that I'm not giving legal advice. But I will say this, CISA and the FBI and the US federal government all agree that you should not pay ransomware for 2 things. One, paying a criminal for them to return the thing that they stole does not give you full assurance that they have A, given you everything, B, that they have left your system and they'll never do it again, which we have seen happen, where you pay the ransom, they give you back, they unlock your data, if you will, and then month, 2 months, 6 months, then they come back and they're like, and now it's double. Now you're going to pay us again. I will tell you, part of that moral of the story is perhaps people didn't fix the problem after the first time and they came in again the same way. And again, some of it is as simple as what Ryan's saying. It's emails to users and other things of clicking in, but then it's exploiting a vulnerability that's exposed in the system of them being able to, as I like to say, swim across all the lanes in your network and figure out what they want to take. So that is the big thing, that there is no assurance that they're criminals in the first place. They don't respond to a good honor code. It's not the same as a handshake of like, okay, if I give you $5, will you stop beating me up tomorrow and not taking my lunch money? That's not how it works, just like any bully. And then it goes to the second point. If things were not successful, if they were not getting money, then they wouldn't continue to do it. They will find, as Ryan kind of said, believe me, there are enough holes all over the place. They'll find something else that costs them little time and energy and money and gets them a reward. So yes, it does take a collective kind of no. It's why, the U.S. government for our actual foreign policy, it's why we say we don't pay terrorists. And it's the same mentality. We do not negotiate with terrorists. We fully encourage, if you ever find yourself in the issue of ransomware, Kelvin, if you give me a little latitude, I want to do a little PSA.
Please.
You call the FBI or you call CISA. And we no matter who you call, we will coordinate with each other and help get you the resources that you need. We would rather you do that than immediately give over, the school board's bank account and pay some ransom. So just a big service announcement. There is a button on our website, CISA.gov. And of course, FBI.gov. There's a place where you can report incidents. There's a phone number that is manned 24/7. If you have a local FBI office or if you know of the local CISA resource that is out there in your state or county, et cetera, call one of us, whether it's a person or the 1-800 line, and we will work with you.
Wow, thanks a lot, Bridgette. Really appreciate that. I know that was a difficult question, but I really appreciate it. Ryan, I'm gonna come back to you because this is something that these are educators, right? They're not necessarily cyber security experts. Here's a great question. Art, I had it about devices. Is it illegal attacks? The question basically was, what devices should you protect? Are all devices, do we need to look at all devices in order to protect them?
That's a really good question. And the answer is actually no. If you have limited resources and all your kindergartners are on Chromebooks, the kindergartners' Chromebooks probably not going to get exploited in a meaningful way. If you look at what really, really targeted organizations often do, they move completely away from the systems that are most likely to get exploited. Unfortunately, Windows, just because of 20+ years of history, tends to be relatively high in that. And ultimately, ransomware actors have a playbook that is also a technical playbook. When they come in and get some initial foothold, whether that is through remote desktop protocol, whether that's through some software vulnerability that faces the internet or the phishing email route, any of those three paths, they're then trying to figure out how to get more and more and more access from things that are all connected. So if you're thinking about the actual devices that you need to protect, you can actually narrow things down by looking at iOS devices, looking at things like, as I mentioned, Chromebooks. Even Android, which for a while had a very poor security reputation, has made massive strides in getting more secure. A malicious macro, not going to work on an iPhone, nor is it going to work on a Chromebook, to be completely candid. And so a lot of those things, frankly, don't need the same level of protection. So if you have scarce budget dollars, don't worry about malware on iOS devices. Yes, there are absolutely ways to exploit an iOS device, but that's going to be, if you are a journalist covering an oppressive regime, you have to worry about that. If you are a kindergartner with a Chromebook, you really don't honestly have to worry about that. If you're thinking about weighing, where limited cybersecurity resources are best applied, that is absolutely true. And the one thing I'll kind of conclude with on that is that is itself an opportunity to look toward a more secure future. If you think about how we patch together machines over the years, we have things like Active Directory, which was built for a time in which everyone had to figure out how to print from the same physical facility. And ultimately, you could probably run a school district without Active Directory. What you cannot run without Active Directory is a successful ransomware campaign, because they have to figure out how to get enough power to get ransomware on all of the managed endpoints that they want to hold for ransom. And so there really are interesting ways to actually take that question and the spirit of that question and parlay it into a long-term strategy that's going to make you a much, much harder target against ransomware actors. And frankly, as Bridgette pointed out very correctly earlier, anyone who would be a cyber criminal trying to compromise you.
So Ryan, follow-up question. You said, one kindergartner with a Chrome, doesn't necessarily have to worry. What about two kindergartners with a Chrome? In fact, no, I'm just kidding. Bridgette's twins.
That's double trouble. That now you just hang it up. That
It doesn't matter if that risk is exponentially growing or linear in terms of its growth. If you multiply it by 0, if you square it, it's still 0.
Yeah, you see, this is why this is so much. But Bridgette, okay, we've talked a lot about prevention, and you start to go in the road of the path of recovery and what to do if you are attacked. Bridgette, continue along that line a little bit. What advice do you have for leaders K through 12 on responding, unfortunately, to a ransomware attack?
So, I think that there are a couple different things. One, we have a ransomware website, CISA.gov/ransomware, that has all kinds of information. And I am going to make sure that, that we even link to things like this webinar for future reference and a future advocacy opportunity for folks to listen in. But this has information on what to do if you get infected with ransomware. It also has, again, this education ransomware guidance that is specifically designed for K through 12, and it's labeled for you as fellow administrators and educators, so that you're able to look at something that is tailored for your type of environment and organization. We have free resources. Everything we're doing at CISA is free to the public and our partners. So we even have things like free cyber hygiene services where you sign a simple agreement, a terms of use, if you will. And again, we have that information on our ransomware website about how to sign up for it, but it will literally, and you give over your internet-facing internet protocol range, your IP range, and we plug it into our system, and it automatically will send you a report, or your CIO, CISO, send you a report every week that will tell you if there are any internet-facing critical, high, medium, or low vulnerabilities that we know of at CISA, and it will tell you exactly what you need to do. So, and at least be aware of it. And then if you have a vendor or somebody that is working on protection for your systems, then you can even cross-check it against your vendor about what they're doing for you. And then if you're doing it in-house, you can utilize that as a checklist internally to be like, have we fixed this? And did we get better over, month, year, time, et cetera, and actually fix all of the things that are being found and sent to you, again, in this free report that comes to you. And that's so important because as Ryan said earlier, there's a system called Showdown that a researcher developed, and it was all of the internet-facing devices, whether it be a printer that is connected to the internet or actual hardcore technology in a plant or a treatment center or a hospital or a school or anything it might be. The idea was, and there are lots and lots that are connected and visible on this system. The idea, though, is that if this person, the researcher that developed this program, if they can find it by literally doing scanning, then so can any bad guy out there, whether it's for things like ransomware or for more important facilities and entities, things like nation states looking at how they can infiltrate the United States and affect our operations and how we function as a country. And so things like our free service for cyber hygiene, it's the same principle. If our system can detect it on their normal scan of your internet facing, IP range, that means anybody can find it. So it really gives you a good playbook. Again, going back to what Ryan said, gives you a good playbook to literally analyze and strategically spend money on fixes and other things strategically to fix some holes that you may have. It will be one more tool in your toolbox. It's not going to give you the whole soup to nuts of how to make yourself completely secure like Fort Knox, but it will be one more piece of data for you as you're strategically looking at how do you use the limited funds you have. And again, all of the things that we've talked about, cybersecurity awareness and training, that we give free templates and free training modules, etc., on ransomware, but on all kinds of cyber things. And we do that a lot in partnership with great partners like the National Cybersecurity Alliance. Information is on both of our websites, but you can find a lot of this on CISA.gov. There is also even free training, cyber training that CISA offers that we partner with. And it is the Federal Virtual Training Environment. Fed VTE is what it's called. And again, you can look for it on our website as well. But if you have a .gov address, you are able to get that free training. If you are a veteran, you're able to get that free training. And we're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of free cybersecurity training. In addition, we also have on our website now that we put it out there. And again, you can even just Google federal Fed VTE and it will pop up the login page. But we even were able to extract a bunch of the training that wasn't proprietary to vendors and others that we paid to create this training for us. We were able to extract some of that training and put it on the front part of our website. So anybody who's changing careers or in the private sector or a small, medium business, et cetera, can go on the front part of the website and there is a button that says free cyber training for everyone. And you can click it and there's all kinds of free courses. So as Ryan said, there are a lot of things that you can do even in your school system as administrators, as CIOs and CISOs, and honestly, just as consumers, you can do to help with this problem, and it literally will take all of us to fix this.
It's certainly a shared responsibility, Bridgette, is certainly what you're speaking to, and I absolutely agree with that. Ryan, I'm gonna give you a shot as well. In the event of a ransomware attack, I mean, anything to add in terms of important steps to take for removal and recovery?
I think one of the points that Bridgette made earlier is a really good one, in that it's actually very hard to evict a ransomware actor from your environment. So certainly it is ideal if you're in a position to have backups and not have to pay the ransom, or you're in a difficult to attack position to begin with, where you have a lot of things in the cloud that are effectively by nature backed up, and you could figure out how to restore all that without sending Bitcoin to a criminal. But again, all of that is nice to say in retrospect. When you're in the middle of a ransomware incident, obviously decisions get really, really hard. I would say the main thing on the eviction front is that that's complicated. So whether that is a matter of just sort of rebuilding everything from scratch, which is ideal if you can pull it off, or actually hiring a proper trained incident response and forensics firm. Obviously, those are expensive, but there's a lot that are more cost effective than they had been in previous years. I used to do that work. It's not the sort of thing that you want to look at a YouTube tutorial and then try yourself. But evicting a threat actor like a ransomware actor, you have to do that, regardless of whether you actually pay the ransom, because if not, it's just going to come back and back and back and back. And ideally, you want to use that as an opportunity to get yourself in a better posture so that your overall cyber resilience goes up after the incident, rather than just saying, all right, well, we basically securitized that risk. We paid our way out of it, and now we're in an equally bad position, actually a worse position, because they know we will pay and that we continue to be vulnerable.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ryan. I really appreciate that. We have, this has been the quickest 57 minutes ever in a webinar. It really flew by. Some really great information. I'm going to ask staff to put up that last slide, though, so that our attendees can see the information in terms of how to get in touch. Thank you very much. How to get in touch with both the National Cybersecurity Alliance, again, of which Proofpoint is a member, and CISA. I can't thank everyone enough for joining us here today. And I got a text from someone saying I need to point out the fact that, because I'm talking to K through 12 educators, I do realize saying Bridgette is the most smartest is not correct. I should have said she's the smartest, or the most smart. We are talking to educators, so I want to make sure that point is
you need to go back to summer school, Kelvin. You have to go back to summer.
Exactly, yeah. I'd probably join your twins. They could probably teach me some stuff there. Really appreciate it. We really had a great time here. I want to end on time and respect folks, their schedules. Ryan, I cannot thank you enough for just sharing the historical, again, all that you share, but that historical perspective you bring to the table. It's always so fascinating to me. And you remind me that, what is new is old in so many ways, just coming back in a different form. And of course, thank you and Proofpoint for being such outstanding supporters of the National Cybersecurity Alliance. Bridgette, same thing, known each other for years, and you always bring incredible knowledge, incredible expertise. But again, you add that personal touch as well that really comes through. So can't thank you enough, Bridgette. Can't thank CISA enough for their support. Everyone, there was questions about some of this material being available to the public. If you go to StaySafeOnline.org, the National Cybersecurity's website, you will find many of these things that we talked about here today. And if you have any other questions about anything, please send an email to info@StaySafeOnline.org about any of this. We absolutely monitor that email and we'll get back to you. CISA has demanded that we do so. So we will be doing that, all right? Hey, Ryan, Bridgette, thank you again so very much. Audience, really want to thank you as well. And we look forward to staying in touch with everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.